Hello, everyone. Today I want to welcome our new guest, Sarah, and I just want to briefly introduce uh, that how I know Sarah. Basically, I've been a part of her recovery journey for a while, and just recently she reached out to me saying that she would like to share her recovery story, but also talk about the specific topic of postpartum insomnia. And I think this is a very valuable topic because so many people going through this experience. And of course, I think sharing recoveries with this specific angle can be very helpful. So thank you for coming here, Sarah. And please feel free to share anything like from your own start of your journey, basically.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Lena. It's so nice to be here and share a little bit of my story because when I first experienced postpartum insomnia, I had no idea what it was. I didn't know what to do, and there wasn't a lot of resources with insomnia, specifically for mothers. There was a ton of resources for babies and how to get your baby to sleep, but when it came to moms, there wasn't a lot. You hear your midwife or your doctor say, sleep when the baby sleeps. And I was like, I can't. Like, stop telling me that. And that just put more pressure on me to sleep. So, anyways, I'm really grateful to be here and to share my story.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you're coming here. And by the way, when it started, like when your journey began.
It started when I gave birth to my son, and he'll be 3 in July. So it'll be 3 years in July. So in 2022, it really started.
Okay. Yeah. And how what was the beginning like?
You know, um, it's funny because before I gave birth, I was watching these videos of these moms, and they would post this like a day in the life of a new mom, and they would record their nights and like how they would feed and how often they would be up. And I watched a few of these and I was like, okay, I can do that, like every 2 to 3 hours, and you feed and you go back to sleep. And it never dawned on me that like I would have so much anxiety because I wasn't getting enough sleep, or that just becoming a mom offers a new anxiety that you haven't really experienced before. So I thought I was well prepared, and then I gave birth, and I had this setup for my baby who he would sleep in the bassinet next to me, and he didn't like the bassinet, and I had so much anxiety about him sleeping in the same bed as us because I was afraid I would roll over on him or he would suffocate. And so that was the only way he would sleep, is like on me. And so those first few nights, I just wasn't sleeping. Like, I
Mm.
think maybe the fifth night, I finally had dreams. And I got to the point where I was like, I couldn't really even have a conversation with someone on the phone. I had no bandwidth for anything because I wasn't sleeping, and I had such high anxiety about it. And my doula came over, and she was like, okay, we've got to change up the situation. Like, this is not working. And I was like having physical sensations at that point. Like, I was shaking, and my nervous system was just so heightened that I couldn't find calm inside of me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't relate to myself in the way that I used to. I couldn't calm myself. It felt very like foreign to me. And so my doula came over, and she's like, all right, your husband and your baby have to go sleep in the other room, and you sleep in the room by yourself. And I was like, I remember having this thought like, oh my God, I can finally sleep. I can finally sleep. And then things started to get a little bit better from there because I was in my own space. When Ellis needed to feed during the night, Evan would bring him in with me. And my sleep was disrupted, but I knew that I was going to sleep because I was in my own bed. And things went pretty steady there for like 2, 3 months. And then I got my period like 4 months postpartum, which is absurd because I was breastfeeding. And usually when you're breastfeeding, you don't get your
Mm-hmm.
period, right? And so I got my period 4 months postpartum. And then out of nowhere, all of these thoughts around my sleep just crept into my mind. I had so much fear around sleep, and I had no control over it. And that's what scared me the most because I'd spent the last decade, coaching teens and women around anxiety and on and off depression. And like I had all these tools that I had relied on for so long, and nothing felt like it was working. And that was, I think, the scariest part for me.
Yeah, I can totally understand the state of this. Like, first of all, you're very like sleep deprived. Like you're, a lot of like stuff has happened, right? And having all this information about that you shared in the beginning, that like you need to sleep when baby sleeps, and all this kind of stuff, like primes our brain to be in more kind of like vigilant and very unsafe state, because it feels like something is wrong just because you cannot, easily transition to sleep. So I can completely understand how much pressure that creates. And so, like, what was your, like, the typical experience of this kind of like rough nights? What your nights look like?
It's interesting because I feel like I have different stages of my postpartum insomnia, like I feel like when I got my period at 4 months, that I entered into a new phase where like I wasn't on medication yet. I was really afraid of medication. And so I'm trying to answer this in a way that feels really helpful, because in the beginning it was like I would just have a lot of anxiety about sleep, but I was actually sleeping. And then when I would get my period, I would have these huge emotional fluctuations where I would just not feel like myself. And so at this point, I called my OB and I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I can't stop crying. I don't feel like myself. And essentially she prescribed me like antidepressant for postpartum depression. And that just made things so much worse. I didn't sleep for 2 days. 2 days. I didn't sleep. It basically, I have a really sensitive system. So I felt like I was on coming off of like a manic depression or like a manic episode. I felt like I couldn't slow down. My mind was just like so heightened, and I didn't sleep for 2 days. It was awful. It was like the worst experience of my life. And from that point on, that's when the anxiety just hit about sleeping. And I didn't know what to do because the OB wouldn't prescribe me anything because I was breastfeeding. Luckily, I had a friend who was a doctor who just prescribed me temazepam. And once he did that, I used that to kind of calm my anxiety. But to be honest, like I didn't even know I had insomnia until probably like 5 months postpartum. I just had a lot of anxiety around sleep. I was sleeping, but I had so much anxiety about it. And then we traveled to Hawaii, and that put a whole, that just threw me a curveball. And then I would say I wouldn't fall asleep till like 2 a.m, and I would just be struggling, like I would just struggle till 1, 2 a.m, and I didn't know what to do. At that point I still wasn't on I guess I was on medication, but I didn't want to take it very often, So it was just like this debacle of like, I'm not sleeping. Do I take the medication? I don't know. Like I was just so I was out of sorts, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, thanks for sharing this. I can imagine like that it was very intense at that time. And then also like what you mentioned is that first you had like anxiety related to sleep, but it not necessarily translated into worse nights. But then actually when you started to kind of like add on more and more layers of trying to sleep, right? That's when it kind of like took a new turn, basically. Like that's when the sleeplessness started to also show up.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating because I feel like I can remember when the sleep shifted and I had anxiety about falling asleep. And this was like probably 6 months postpartum. And from that point on, it kind of has been pretty steady as far as like what I had anxiety about, like where the sleep anxiety was. And for me, it was like falling asleep. If I didn't fall asleep in an hour, I would be like really stressed out. And then if I didn't fall asleep in 2 hours, the anxiety would just like, just compound, And then if I didn't fall asleep till 2, 3 in the morning, I dreaded the next day. I was like, oh my God, I'm a new mom. I have to take care of my kid. Like I'm going to be so miserable. Like, why is this happening to me? Like, it was really, really difficult for me. And there were so many different like phases of healing that took place within those first 2 years. But I would say like for majority of my journey, the I had most anxiety about falling asleep. And if I didn't fall asleep until 2 or 3 in the morning, that's when I would kind of go down the rabbit hole of just feeling really awful about myself, my life, feeling miserable, like wishing this would just go away. And that was the hardest part for me is just being up at 2, 3 in the morning and just knowing like what was to come the next day, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I totally understand this. It sounds like what Coach Daniel introduced this term, which is called acceptability threshold. It's some sort of a line that we draw where if I manage to sleep before this line, then I'm good, right? Even if there is some sleep disruption or I wake up and so on, I still consider it as like kind of success, right? But if I don't, that's when things get really tough, right? So there's this kind of like all or nothing thinking, basically, either this or that.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting is like I feel like postpartum insomnia was like the fast track to healing. And anyone with insomnia. It's like, oh, you want to heal? Okay, here's insomnia. This is the fast track to insomnia. If you want to heal your anxiety, here, you deal with it every single night.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I
full
mean?
experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and I understand completely because I don't have this experience with this kind of like, also taking care of a child. So I can imagine that it's probably also very pressuring, like to have this struggle, but also perform the next day to be there for a child. And it's understandably a very challenging experience. But the good thing is that thanks to people like yourself, who is here to share the process of recovery and overcoming this, it can also be a really nice beacon of light for anyone who is currently struggling with this experience and thinking that because I'm having such a seemingly impossible situation where I have so much pressure on me to take care of another person, and for many people it might feel even impossible to overcome this. But as you said, it probably can be like kind of like fast track to healing. Basically, like having extra challenge can paradoxically facilitate the process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I really believe that we all have our own journey that we're meant to take when it comes to postpartum insomnia and insomnia in general. And so it's really easy to compare our journeys to someone else, but I really believe that like what we're going through in this lifetime is kind of what our soul contracted. And so we're never given more than we can handle because our soul contracted the difficult times that we will go through on earth. And that belief really just helped me know that there was this spiritual aspect to what I was going through and that there was actually divine purpose with what I was going through. And that was like kind of a lifeline for me. And using the fear and using the anxiety as like a sign of huge growth that I was about to go through. Because every speed bump I went through, even though I was just like, God damn it, every time I made it out, I was not the same person. And I acquired something new, a new lesson or a new skill, or I was just gifted with something that could help me the next time. And if it weren't for those speed bumps, I don't think that I would have been able to heal the way that I was meant to. And I do want to say, like, when we go through speed bumps, it's like because we're ready. It's like maybe not on a conscious level, but like the universe wouldn't make us go through something if we weren't actually ready for it. if we weren't ready to grow at the capacity that we are meant to grow at. So I just love that belief because it just really takes you out of that fear and gives fear new meaning that can actually elevate your experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with this. And I really like what you said about that we are always giving like kind of the level of challenge that we are capable of overcoming. And that is so true. In the moment when the challenge is present, we would hate it. We would just realize like, I don't want this. But when it's kind of like, when we are past it, then we can start seeing like, oh, okay, there was some meaning. And I like your perspective on this. And I think it's very helpful in recovery, especially that to look at those struggles or speed bumps that we are going through and see what kind of lessons that we can extract from them. But maybe just to kind of like bring like attention back to the timeline. So basically, like, so that's how you started like struggling. Then first there was sleep anxiety. Then the sleep got also kind of like affected. And when was the time when you started kind of like sensing the right direction of recovery? Was it something that you encountered some, resource or anything like, or you spoke to someone? How did that started?
Yeah, so I would say I was working with one of my coaches that I've worked with for a long time, and I just want to. I'm just going to take a minute to actually go and get the answer that wants to come through. So, like I said, my journey was in phases, and I believe that I had to approach myself in new ways so that I could graduate to the next level and learn something else. So, the first level that I embarked on was really learning how to reparent myself. And so I had a lot of judgment around taking medication. And I wouldn't allow myself to have medication even though I was really struggling. And I remember this like very pivotal moment. I was on the phone with my coach and I was just feeling so bad about myself that I was still here. I still haven't recovered fully. I'm still having anxiety around my sleep. Like, what's wrong with me? This whole storyline. And she was like, what it sounds like a part of you is really asking for help. Like, she is crying out for help. She really needs help. And by you not giving her this medication, it's exacerbating her experience. And for me, it was like, wow, there's a teenage girl inside of me who was totally abandoned growing up and didn't get her emotional needs met. And she learned how to just push through things. She just pushed her way through and was very like hard on herself and very rigid. And so when she said that, like, this part of you is really crying for help. If your son was crying for help, what would you offer him? And I would say, take the medication. Like, do what you need to do. And that was a huge moment of softening into myself and connecting to this part of me who was crying out and saying to her, okay, I'm here. Like, I'm not going to abandon you anymore. I'm not going to leave you. We will get through this. Like, whatever we need to do, I'm here for you and we will get through this. And I had to really mother this part of me the same way I would mother my kid. And that was like the first phase of healing, I would say.
Wow. Yeah, I think this what you're describing is this concept of like self-kindness and self-compassion, basically. And I love that you use the term like self-parenting. I think this is it's more precise. It's more, at least it tells people exactly like what we mean by self-kindness, because it also includes this becoming like a parent to ourselves, like someone who is there in the tough moments, who is not going to judge or criticize or, try to change that part, but actually accept it for what it is. So
Totally.
I think this is
Exactly.
so valuable. Yeah. So that was kind of like your first like introduction to healing, let's call it that way, right? So and from that point, what was your experience with with the journey?
Yeah, so I would say, my friend, she's a psychic medium, and I was a part of her, I think it's called like a soul membership. And so that was in the summer. That was like that was like when Ellis turned a year old. That's kind of where I was at of like learning how to kind of reparent myself. In that fall, winter, I was working with her, and she really helped me. She just offered me a more spiritual approach to what I was going through. So she helped me with, have you ever heard of tapping?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I would do some tapping, which really helped. And then honestly, connecting to my higher self. And because when I connect to my higher self, I'm like what they call like, you were all intuitive, right? We all have intuitive gifts. And the gift that, is more predominant for me is like clairvoyant. So I see things, right? So going through this whole experience just opened me up to my intuitive gifts, and I had been, you know, really connected to my higher self before becoming a mom, and this just like, you know, opened the gates. And so that was like the next phase of like really connecting to my higher self and hearing its messages. And I would see things and it would show me like where I was and what I was going through. And a lot of the time it would be like these images of me just being kind of in this dark place, but like there's light and like I would see myself coming out of it. And I knew that like, okay, this is temporary. I'm here right now. I'm in a speed bump, but like the light is right there. I can see it. My higher self is telling me like this is actually where I'm meant to be right now. I actually can't fast forward this part. Like being in the darkness is actually going to make the light so much lighter and juicier and yummy, right? So that was like my second phase of like really taking a spiritual approach. And it's so interesting because my friend Allison, she's amazing. She was like, at 2 years, she's like, at the 2 year mark, I really see this wound being healed. And I was like, 2 years? I was like, fuck, that's like 7 more months. And so that was the second phase. The third phase is when I found Daniel's sleep coach school.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in May. And then Ellis turned 2 in July. So there's more to share on that, but I'm going to pause and just see where you want to go from there.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And actually, I wanted to comment on that second phase of your recovery journey, which is it is such an interesting angle to look at it, what like through the lens of spirituality and this higher self and intuition and all this kind of stuff. And to me, what this kind of translated into to what you were saying is actually learning the act of trust and acceptance, which is basically like in the first phase, it sounds like your main focus was self-kindness, or in your term it was like self-parenting, right? Finding ways to cooperate with yourself, integrate all parts of yourself. And then in the second phase, it was more about learning to let go and surrender. And I think that many people can appreciate that spiritual spin on this, just to see it as something that has a meaning, something that has, there is something that kind of like guides us through these difficult times. We don't have to put more effort into this. We don't have to figure it all out. We don't have to know all the answers right now. We are going to just trust. And interesting enough, like whether we take it from the spiritual angle or from a different angle, it's basically, we are talking about like just letting go of control. And I think this is so helpful on this journey. And
I love
so
that.
absolutely, like that's when you were sharing this, and to me it's like was kind of like an like really interesting angle, interesting perspective. to look at recovery journey, because we can look at it through so many ways, through maybe philosophical, psychological, maybe biological, like when we are feeling like threat and so on, like in wakefulness, but also it can be understood from like a spiritual perspective. And I think like each person can find a perspective that resonates deeply with them. So I love that you
Totally.
brought it up.
And I love that you're able to like ground all of it. You know what I mean? Like I can be very like esoteric and like spiritual and like woo flowy and like, So I love that you see these phases and you ground them so beautifully so that other people can relate to like, yeah, the self-love and the compassion and the reparenting and like the acceptance and the trust, right? Yeah, that's beautiful. I think super helpful for people.
Yeah, but what you shared made total sense. I kind of like sensed what you were talking about, even though you were using like a different terms for that and different words. For me, it made total sense. It's like I would also experience, like I also experienced my process of navigating the difficult moments through that. At some point, I just realized like I cannot figure it out on my own. Like I cannot just logically come to a conclusion how to, let's say, stop worrying and then start sleeping. This is something that
Totally.
is gonna happen when it's gonna happen.
Totally. And I think that's like the third phase, honestly. It's like I found Danielle's sleep coach school. I went through it and it was very similar to what I had gone through my life coach training with Martha Beck and then with equine therapy. All very similar, but I applying it again to sleep was so helpful. And then having, other peers who are going through it. I feel like that was like the third phase. And that's what I needed to experience the healing at a somatic level. And by that I mean, I had like a binge eating disorder for about 10 years and I did all the work, I did the thought work and I did, I went through the life coach training and I was like literally going to therapy for like 9 months and I was doing all of this inner work. And at some point it's like, there's no more work to do. Like you've done it all, And then I remember like when the fear came up, and I'll relate this back to sleep in a second, when the fear came up around food and being fat, like that was the fear I had of like not fitting into my clothes and being fat. It came up one last time and I remember exactly where I was and I went into my body, I took a deep breath and that wound completely left my body. Like I've never dealt with that again. Like I've never had a fear around being fat again. It was completely gone. And so I share that because when my friend Allison was like, okay, at the 2-year mark, like there's this wound around sleep is like, it's going to be healed. Literally, the day before Elsa's birthday, I felt the same somatic shift in my body. And because here's the thing is like, we can do all the thought work. We can do we have to do the inner work of like reparenting ourselves and doing the thought work and, accessing our intuition and journaling and just relating to ourselves in a new way. And when we've reached a point where we've like graduated from that, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like a somatic experience. It's not mental anymore. You just breathe. I can't explain it, but like the fear comes up, I take a breath, and it leaves my body. And that's like, I think that's like the third phase is just like after doing all of this inner work, the somatic, like the healing is like on a somatic level. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That was a
I think
lot.
so. I think so because like to me when I hear like the term like like somatically like something got released, what this translates me to is that our emotional part of the brain finally started to catch up with our rational part of the brain. Because oftentimes like when we go through this experience of like recovery, like first we do like usually it happens that first we do a lot of this kind of like reframing, like on a rational level, just seeing that we are safe and just understanding better our emotions, our the whole topic of insomnia, right? But then usually what people uh, stumble upon is that they say something like, I understand this rationally, intellectually, it makes total sense that I just need to let go. But there is something in
Right.
me that doesn't let go, right?
Right.
And usually I kind of like introduce this idea that in recovery, there is usually a delay between our rational understanding and our emotional understanding. And that emotional understanding really takes time, takes experience, takes, the ups and downs for it to finally kind of like start grasping what we understood rationally.
Right.
And so sometimes that actually like happens in those moments when we have a fear or something like this, like some emotional tension. It can feel very physical in our body, and then we just realize, oh wait, that's no longer a problem, and it goes away,
Right.
right? So it's like at the moment when finally our emotional understanding starts to catch up with the rational one. That's how I explain it. So does it make sense?
Right. Yeah, totally. And I feel like, and tell me your thoughts on this. I feel like in order to get to that somatic level of like the healing is, it's like in our nervous system. It's like our nervous system has like caught up, like you said, you know? We have to go through it. Like
Oh
we
yeah,
can't think our way through it. Do you know what I mean? We
absolutely.
actually, unfortunately and fortunately, we have to go through the difficult moments and the times in order to reach that place of like nervous system regulation and healing at like a somatic level. Does that make sense? What do
Yeah,
you think?
totally, 100%. Like I like usually say, like the brain has to see it to believe it. It has to go through the experience of like ups and downs, seeing like the let's call like the our like lowest points, just to see that even those are survivable.
Right.
And so with time, there is already kind of the mystery behind insomnia gets kind of like demystified,
Right.
and then there is no longer like there's no mystery, there is no secret, there is nothing like that, nothing unknown. And that's when like our brain just already feels, okay, there is nothing, no work for me to do anymore
Right.
protecting you. So
Right.
that's how I essentially like interpret this kind of experience. And it's interesting that for each person it can happen differently. For example, for you it happened was with this kind of like one kind of like moment when you just realize like, okay, the fear does not have any hold over you, right? And for someone else, like for example, for me it was more gradual. It was very kind of like, at the end it was kind of like warring paced. There was just here and there this fears, and then it's like sometimes I would get caught up on it, and then just like, okay, it passes, and then again pops up and then it passes, right? I know, I don't know
Yeah,
if
that
you
was the
if
same for me too.
uh-huh,
It was
okay.
like at first it was like a huge release, but then the last 6 months I would say, you know, when I would have a speed bump or the fear would come up, I would take a breath and like feel the truth in my body. It's like I allowed my breath to help me heal.
Mm,
So instead of going and trying to figure it out with my head, I just went to my breath, took a deep breath, and that's all I needed. I actually didn't need to go to my head and try to figure it out. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah, totally makes sense. It feels like there was this moment of like that breath was this representation of letting go of control, like, okay, now I can exhale, I can just let the body figure this out. And
Right.
sometimes for some person it could look like a breath. For me, it didn't necessarily look like a
I
breath.
see.
For me, it more kind of like looked like a remembrance of, I don't have to figure this out anymore. Like why? Like
Right.
that's doesn't matter. Like what's going on. It's like at some point, sleep will happen at some point. So I don't know when and how. I'm not gonna solve it. It's none of my problem anymore. And that's
I
how
love
it was
that.
for me. So
I love
so
that video you recorded about that. That helped me so much when I was in a speed bump like yeah, the summer. I love that video.
Yeah, I think maybe it's also helpful to talk about like experience of speed bumps because what I noticed is that people when they hear recovery stories, they have this like a certain view on, okay, this is how others' journeys are, and this is how mine should be, you know. And what I find that a lot of times, like with this with recovery stories, a lot of stuff gets kind of omitted, like not like the let's say for example, if you would see like my recovery story on the Sleep Coach School channel, then I usually talk about the highlights, right? Like the
Right.
biggest aha moments, maybe like some specific like things to remember. But I, I didn't have like a, you know, I didn't talk about these moments when things were kind of like not changing or I was kind of confused. I was like, I don't know what's going on. So in my mind, I find it's so helpful to normalize those experiences as well, not just talk about the highlights and the most memorable moments, but also talk about kind of like stuff where nothing was happening or we felt like, okay, I'm kind of like, I'm not supposed I'm not sure what am I supposed to do here, right?
Hmm.
So have you experienced those times?
I love that. And, I had a speed bump like 3 months ago in December and we had a call. And I was like, what the fuck? This hasn't happened in so long. Like, what is going on? And it was like, I remember you saying towards the end of yours, and this is what helped me. So just take what I always just say, like, take what resonates. And if it doesn't resonate, it's totally not for you. And if it does resonate, it's for you, right? And what resonated for me with you what you told me, you were like, at the end of my journey, I had like kind of my biggest speed bumps that like kind of threw me a bit, and it wasn't like just this like smooth sailing. And so for me, that happened in December, and it was like, when I was in it, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, you just feel so helpless, you know? And I will say, looking back, it was really short lived, honestly. And then I had a little bit of anxiety about sleep just a few days, a few weeks after that. And, you know, but I slept, yeah, that was like a huge speed bump at like, while in a time where I thought I was like mostly healed. Do you know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, this is gold in my opinion. This is so many people are coming with this experience when they feel like, oh, I thought I was recovered. I thought I was behind this or like past this. And they hit a very kind of like pretty strong speed bump where they feel kind of lost and very frustrated. So I think it's also helpful to even demystify this kind of experiences because they are more common than we think it is. It happened with me as well. It's helpful that you're sharing this experience as well, so that the person who is going through something like this doesn't feel alone, doesn't feel like, oh my God, like all this, all the progress that I've made was for nothing. I still had this like speed bump. There's something wrong. So if you had to say something to that person or to yourself like 3 months ago, like what would you say?
Hmm. Just something like, you can't see it now, but this too is a part of your growth. And it's actually going to expedite your healing journey. You don't need to know how, but just knowing that by going through this, it's expediting your healing.
I love that. I really love that.
Yeah. And even last night, I mean, here's the thing is, I'm going to Montana tomorrow. I'm traveling on an airplane with my son. It's just the two of us. And I still have anxiety about traveling, which before becoming a mom, I never had. I could sleep anywhere, okay? I could sleep anywhere. I could sleep before I traveled, after I traveled, whatever. You know what I mean? And now it's like, okay, the more I travel, I think the more confident I will become. But yeah, I have anxiety about feeling good on the travel day. Like my worst fear is like not sleeping before traveling and feeling like I can't be the mom that I want to be to my son while we're traveling. And so there's two parts to this. Like, one, before I travel, I take a pill. That's just what I do. And I know there will be a time when I don't have to take a pill again to travel. And I know that will happen. And I'm not there yet. And that's okay. And so I'm going to take a pill. And that's going to make me feel good. And I don't need to think about it. It doesn't need to be a thing. It just is what it is. Yeah. And last night, I could like feel the anxiety about traveling. And so last night at like 11 p.m., after I fell asleep, my son woke up and came into bed with us. And I was like, oh my God, I have anxiety. Like, oh, and I immediately, even I'm like 2.5 years on my journey, I feel like pretty good, you know? Immediately I go to like panic, you know? Like, oh my God, fuck, I have anxiety. No, 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 no. And then I was like, okay, connect to my breath, get into my body. The only thing I can do is just be calm. No matter what happens, like my main goal is to find the calm within myself. And so I took a deep breath. I went into my body, out of my head, into my body, took a deep breath, and I fell asleep. And then I woke up kind of early this morning, and I was like, oh man, I'm waking up early. Why is this happening? And I could feel myself in my head a little bit, you know? And then I just got up and I didn't make it a thing. And this takes time. Like before I would have made it a thing, you know? And I also want to say like, when the anxiety would creep in, because it comes when you least expect it, at least in my experience.
Totally.
When you
Yes.
least expect it, you're like, really? Fuck. And I would always, like I said, go to panic and then I would go to fight it. Like I would fight it. I would be so mad and I would fight it. And then I would finally come to sadness and I would just be so sad. And then I'd finally reach acceptance. And so I guess I just want to say to anyone who's judging themselves for having a mental breakdown or fighting it and resisting it, it's like, it's okay. It's actually a part of the process. And the more compassion you can have for yourself and the more you can forgive yourself, like the easier it's going to be for you, you know?
Yeah, that makes total sense. I love that you also described like your recent experience, how you went through it. So it gives like, you know, someone who is finding themselves in a similar situation, some sort of like a tangible like example, like to how this experience can be met, right? And I love that you described that the fact that there was a panicky response is not actually a problem, right? It's the point of recovery is just being good at spotting the moments when we kind of like have this kind of like urge to problem solve and just see how we can let go of that urge, but not judging ourselves for having the reaction in the first place. There's nothing wrong with that reaction. And for me, that was exactly like this is like also the kind of like the residual speed bumps that were happening. They were also like sometimes like out of blue, there would be anxiety out of blue, right? But it was not a problem. It was not a problem because like I knew that I couldn't control it. Like I didn't voluntarily chose to have this experience. So I started saying like, okay, who cares that I'm having this anxiety? It doesn't matter. It's like now I see it in a different way. I no longer go into this problem solving, fixing mode. I just let it be there. And it becomes, as you said, short-lived.
I love that. I love how you said there's not a problem with panicking. Because I think so often we panic and then we freak out because we're panicking.
Oh, yeah.
which then just exacerbates the panic, you know? It's like the irony of
Exactly.
it all is just like so
Yes.
ridiculous, you know? So I love that you said that there's not, that's not the problem, you know?
Yes.
That like eases, that just eases my mind too, just hearing that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of things that we think are a problem are actually not a problem. It's like our thinking about it is that's what creates struggle and suffering. But in reality, those things that they are totally natural. And I feel that you're like in such a good state, like or mindset, looking at this with this kind of like realistic, very compassionate eyes on this journey. And I think that that's so helpful. And that's the thing, like at least for me, like the tail end of recovery was kind of like I just let life to show me the way further. I didn't have to do anything extra. I didn't have to think about, okay, what else I need to work on. No,
Right.
it's like life is going to throw lessons to your feet, basically. Like let's say a trip that is coming up, that's such a great opportunity. Then maybe like in a couple of months some another opportunity comes up, right? Naturally, you don't have to look for it, you don't have to manufacture it. It just life will take care of the rest. So that's how
Totally.
usually this process unfolds.
And I remember Daniel saying, you know, when I finished it in last August, the sleep coach school, I remember him saying something like, "Oh, you're traveling and you have anxiety about that? Great. That's just the next level of healing that you're available for, that you're ready for." You know? And so that like belief of like, well, one, of course I'm going to have anxiety. Okay, of course you're going to be here. And it's maybe it's a sign of impending growth.
Yes,
Of
growth
like,
comes with discomfort.
right, exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. And one more thing I wanted to ask you, like your perspective on this, and it relates to the specifically topic of like dealing with also like responsibilities of a parent. A lot of people share something like, I just feel like I'm a bad parent. I'm a bad mother. I cannot be there for my child. And they feel such an immense pressure on themselves, a huge amount of self criticism. And I just want to maybe just ask, like, what are your thoughts on this? Like, do you have any maybe words to say to the person who is kind of like beating themselves up for going through a struggle, but also having those like responsibilities? So something that you find is helpful to hear.
Yeah, I would say, well, it's not your fault. Like, whatever is happening is not your fault, and you've done nothing wrong. Like, it's not that I think so often mothers think that they deserve this or something, you know? And it's like, you've done nothing wrong, and this is not your fault. And I think one of the only ways through this is to learn how to soften into the parts that you're most hard on yourself. As women, especially, and moms, we internalize our suffering. And by that, I mean we make ourselves wrong for a difficult time that we may be going through or certain emotions that we have. So, for example, like insomnia, right? We can make it mean something negative about ourselves. Oh, well, we're this or we're that, or there's something wrong with us, or we're a bad mom because we're going through this. And it's like, what if we stopped making it mean anything negative about ourselves and we instead offered ourselves some compassion and forgive ourselves? I think forgiving ourselves is a huge step towards healing. Um, and I would say, you know, if your son or your daughter was going through this, what would you say to them? And whatever you would say to them, you say to that scared part inside of you. And just keep repeating it over and over and over. That's what I had to do. I just kept repeating it. I got you. We're going to, whatever we need to do, we're going to figure it out. Answers are going to come. We're going to heal. I'm right here with you. We'll figure it out. I love you. I love you. I love you.
Yeah, well, that's so true and so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for coming here and sharing your story. I'm sure that many people will find so much value in your wisdom. It's always good to hear an immediate experience from someone who is just kind of like experienced it themselves. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thanks, Alina. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all the work you're doing, and just you're healing so many people. And yeah, I know I can speak for everyone that we're all just so thankful for you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see each other in some other video. Bye, everyone.